What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Goddess Z, and I'm back with another podcast episode. I hope that everybody has been taking care of themselves, mind, body, and spirit, because that's what it's all about. If any one of those things are out of balance, then we are out of balance in our lives, okay? So if you are new to this podcast, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you decided to stop by and take a listen. Be sure to hit that follow or that subscribe button so that you get notified every time I drop a new podcast episode. And these podcasts will be airing consistently every Friday, the first Friday and the third Friday of the month at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are starting to have guests on the show now, and they are bringing their wealth of expertise in spirituality, conscious living. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And if you are coming back to the podcast, welcome, welcome back, family. Welcome, tribe. I appreciate you guys so much. And I hope that you're finding some useful information to be able to integrate this in your life. All right, so you know how your girl does. I got to get that business out of the way first because once we get into the conversation and the topic, we are in the conversation, okay? So first and foremost, you can find me all over social media at Holistic and Spiritual AF, and that's and spelled out. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and now Substack. I have a publication on Substack if you like to read newsletters and blogs and stories. I write over there as well. So be sure to follow me in those respective places that resonate with you. And also, an update, I'll have all this information down in the description. I will be hosting a Raise Your Frequency to Abundance Masterclass. That's going to be on Wednesday, September the 25th of 2024 at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so you're going to want to come into that class. It's going to be very beneficial for you if you're somebody that has been doing the work and you can't figure out why it is that you still don't have what it is that you're trying to manifest. So we're going to go into some great details and actual applicable tips and ways that you can raise your vibration to become a magnet to success, love, healing, and abundance. Okay, you're going to learn a very powerful manifestation method to turn your affirmations into reality. And then, of course, we're going to learn how to release ancestral blocks that have been holding us back because you know your girl is very rooted to her ancestors. Okay, so be sure to check that out. This is a free masterclass once again on Wednesday, September the 25th of 2024 at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I would love to meet you guys like one-on-one over there in that vibe as well. All right, so let me go ahead and get into it. Today, my guest is a very special guest. I'm very excited to have her on the show. She's also a co host of the podcast formerly known as Evolving Ish. They have now just recently had an update. So you can find that podcast at Spiritual Bae, BAE, and that's everywhere you can find podcasts as well. And my guest today's name is Monique J. She's actually a serial entrepreneur, certified life coach. She's a mom and a wife, and her awakening to spiritual consciousness began at the age of 27 years old. Now, get this. This was after she resigned as an ordained minister of the Christian faith. Okay, so she definitely holds a lot of spiritual gifts. She was having lots of unexplainable paranormal experiences and mediumship ability. So you definitely want to tune in for this conversation because I can definitely let you know up front it is juicy. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. All right. So thank you so much, Monique, for agreeing to join me today. Today, guys, I've already done my introduction, but I'm going to introduce her again. This is Monique J. She is a podcast host along with Sheena for the podcast name Evolving Ish, and she's doing amazing things out here in the podcast realm as well as the spiritual realm. So I'm really excited to have her on the show today because she has a wealth of knowledge to bring to the table. Um, Welcome, welcome, Monique.
Thank you, Zipporah, so much for having me on the show. It is truly an honor to connect with you in this way, in this intimate space you've created. I also am a fan of your show and what you're doing for the community, showing up as a Black woman in this space. We need more of it, okay? And
Yes.
all the new age people coming up, which is fantastic too. But, representation matters.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I definitely feel you on that. And like I said, I started my podcast 22. My ancestors was just like get out there and do it. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I definitely get it today. So I want to talk a little bit about you because I was definitely drawn to you and your work as I went and researched you on Instagram. Um, so your spiritual journey began pretty young, around 5 or 6. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood experiences, like, and your connection to spirituality? What was that like?
Oh man, it has been the basis for a lot of what I have done in my life over the years, whether that's spiritually and or the carnal things, right? My home ground, my sacral rooting and grounding myself has always been in spirituality and the paranormal because they intertwine. There's an intersectionality there between the two, right? And
Absolutely.
so at 5, I can vividly remember to this day the first time that I had a spiritual experience, which was at my great aunt's house in New Jersey, in Newark to be exact. She lived in a very crime ridden area of Newark, and she lived in housing projects for many, many years since my mom was a child. And I remember vividly before going into her house, we're standing at the door waiting for her to answer. And as soon as she answers and I walk in, there was a dot about this big, about the size of a dime, just float across my face. And that was my
Mm.
first visual, physical experience with spirituality and the paranormal. Yeah, so that was
Wow.
wild at 5. That
That's what I
was
was gonna
wild.
say.
I was about 5, between 5 and 7, and that was wild for me. It was something I had never experienced. And in those before that or right around the same time is also when I um, was sexually abused by a family friend's son who was 3 years older than me. And so I was happy to have that experience before the sexual abuse started because it kind of helped me from going insane as a kid and
Mm,
dealing with all that comes with sexual abuse
yes,
and being molested specifically. And of course, with sexual abuse, it opens other doors that shouldn't be opened at
it
that age,
does.
And so I knew then at that point that there was something much bigger going on outside of our carnal world and such.
That's pretty deep. At 5, I can relate, not so much to the paranormal, and I did have some sexual trauma as well, but it was a little older. 5 is a
Mm-hmm.
very young age.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the fact that you had the paranormal experience at 5, I'm pretty sure that had to be like, what is going on? What is happening? Did I see what I
Mm-hmm.
think I saw? But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, with being so young and not quite conditioned by society yet, you probably were more open to it. And I remember things as a child. My dreams were very
Mm-hmm.
vivid. Later on went to get greater understanding of that, and I even had one of those dreams that I used to have, which I think is a past life experience because I
Mm-hmm.
remember it so vividly from like 5 and 7, being somewhere and there were these huge totems. And I was small. They just seemed giant compared to me. And I remember just being either in this other dimension or in another life at some point. And I never had the dream again until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was at that place again. And I was like, wow. And so I remember having this connection with my ancestors at a young age, about 5 or 7, but there was a lot of trauma going on in my life at the time. And like you said, that saved me. It was like my ancestors were placed there because they knew the journey that I was going to have to go through. And that's what kept me somewhat sane, knowing that I had them and I didn't have all the world to tell about what I was experiencing, but we had our little, our unit and our connection, and we had this telepathic, relationship. So I totally relate to that. That's really deep. So five and
Mm-hmm.
six, so, did you have any other childhood experiences that you can remember, like in early childhood?
Mm-hmm. So within the first 2 years of having that first physical experience, the same aunt We went back to her house. My mom had promised her that we would do Christmas with her. And at the time, my parents weren't married yet. And so we would run up to Jersey like on a drop of a hat to check on my grandmother and such like that.
Mhm.
And so we went to see her, and then we went to my great aunt's house to spend the night with her. She really wanted us all three to do Christmas together. And so that night when it was time to go to bed. And I'll preface this by saying the energy that I was feeling before you even stepped out of the car, just being in that environment was really strong. It was very negative. It was very sad and feeling an energy of depression from
Mm,
all the things that the people formerly who had lived there and still live there was dealing with things that I couldn't even have fathomed back then as a kid because there was so much gun violence, so much drugs and
mm,
desperation. And, if you think about it on a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, being in that
mm.
survival mode at the bottom, right?
Right.
And it's so funny because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the colors are very similar to that of your chakras. And so that survival mode on there is in red, just like your sacral, not your sacral, but your root chakra. And that's where we process a lot of emotions and negativity and shadow self and such. And so the energy just was always energying over there. And so that night, my mom put me to bed in another room. Her and my aunt were out into the living room area. And my mom closed the door, not all the way, but it was like, how you push the door closed, but it doesn't connect with the lock. And so it
Right.
was like that, just a smither of light coming through the side of it. And next thing I know, I'm laying there. I'm like, okay, Santa, I want you to come. I'm calling on the energy of Santa. Bring me these gifts, okay? And so next thing I know, that door swings open. And it wasn't fast and powerful like to really make me fearful or surprise me in a very strong way and
Mhm.
or alert the adults. It was just creaked right on open. So I'm like, wait a minute now. I didn't do this. Nobody's over here. I get up, I pushed it the way my mom had it, just a little creak, and then it happens again. This time I didn't get back up because I began to feel fearful. So I called my mom and I said, Mom, that door just opened up. And she could see it. The door was open. And I was like, I didn't do that. I was like, something strange is going on. And so she
Mhm.
said, I understand. And that was it for that time being because she didn't want to like scare my aunt. And so she did it again. She closed the door with just a creak and it didn't happen again. Now the energy that I felt when it was happening, because I was so young, it
Mhm.
scared me,
Yeah.
not having a full understanding in the language to understand what was going on too. And at this time, she had spoken to me about God and the male God and Christianity and such, but we weren't actively involved in any organized religions at the time. So
Mhm.
after that happened the next day and we left and we were on our way back to Maryland, she had a conversation with me about it. And she said, there are spirits and energy in our environment. And also didn't really have the language back then either, because although she had had her own experiences, I think she was struggling with how to explain it to me at my age,
Okay.
regardless of how much of an old soul I was and I presented myself, to be. And so, but her acknowledging and validating that there was something outside of ourselves sometimes. And that was enough for me. And that was
Mhm.
enough for me to stay grounded in my belief that I know I saw what I saw
All
because she
right.
too felt the energies, the negative energies in the environment where my great aunt lived in basically the ghetto,
Yeah.
and such. And so that was very affirming for me. That's not a conversation I could have had with my dad. And I know that and I knew that. So it's not something I ever had a conversation with him about, but yeah, it was wild. It was really
That
wild.
that's really awesome that she validated that for you, that you had somebody to say, hey, you're not strange, this is, possible. Um, wow, like I'm thinking, what if, because I know that I'm like one of the first in my
Hmm. Hmm.
lineage. So all of this stuff was strange to them, when I started my journey. And, there was so much trauma going around and, talking and being expressing wasn't something that we did, you know. So like I said, I had that whole internal realm that was me and my ancestors. And I used to talk to my spirit guides, you know, when I was
Mm-hmm.
alone, there was nobody else around. I would talk to them like I'm talking to you. And I
Mm-hmm.
still talk to them sometimes like that when I'm around. And people that know me know. They'd be like, "You talking to me or you talking to yourself again?" I'd be like, "I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to my spirit guides. We working it out, you know."
Yes,
So
indeed.
but I remember
Absolutely.
getting to be about maybe 7 or 8 and them telling me, they were like, "Look, you can't be just talking to us like that out in the open because people don't understand. You got to find
Mm-hmm.
a way to speak to us." Basically, they were teaching me how to speak internally, being telepathically, speaking to them
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
resonating with them. But yeah, there was nobody for me to go to, and I was experiencing a lot of things, you know, and I couldn't go to my mother, and my father wasn't around to go to. And then I grew up in such a religious household, honey. You better not come telling that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, you know, it wasn't expressing. It was, you believe this way, that's it. And if you don't, you know, you gonna die. Like it was just that
Mm-hmm.
serious. It was so black and white. And but like you as a kid, I was always into anything magical, anything metaphysical, like anything outer space. I love that because I just knew there was something else. I was like, this world that I'm living cannot just be it. There's got to be something bigger out there. And I would love when I had these dreams and I visited these different places and I would fly and I had all of these abilities that I didn't have in the human form. So I had no understanding or no knowledge of anything. I just experienced it and I internalized a lot of it. And I think like I'm actually writing a book now called My
Mm-hmm.
Ancestors Raised Me. And it kind
Mm-hmm.
of
Come
goes
on
into
now.
it comes into a lot of that because, like I said, being the first one in my family to correct a lot of this trauma. That's why healing generational trauma is so important to me because we got a lot of it, you know, and
Come
somebody's got to
on.
break this cycle. And so I'm the first, you know, and I didn't have anybody to show me this stuff. And I started my journey early too at 23, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been on it ever since. And you know, so for me it's my ancestors raised me. When I look
Mm-hmm.
back in
Mm-hmm.
hindsight and I'm telling these stories in this book, I'm like, they raised me. They were
Mm-hmm.
the ones that were with me from that little girl that I described that was helping me with my spiritual experience of life, you know. So that's what the book is about. So that's powerful, girl. You was doing
Yeah,
some
but
big
that's
things.
powerful for you too, because even
Yeah,
though we have a lot of shared experiences, I had the validation and you didn't. So how did you navigate that as you were
yeah,
growing up? Where did you get that validation that you needed to confirm that you didn't need to be in no psychiatric hospital? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Especially when we're talking about puberty kicking in.
Yes, yes. And then I had something traumatic happen then too. You
Mm,
know, but yeah, I think I just had this inner connection like to my ancestors that was deeper than anybody on the planet. The only person that I had that close of a connection with was my great grandmother. And I
mm,
just loved her. You know, she was 92 when she transitioned, but I had spent a brief amount of time with her as a little girl, about 5 or 6, and she was also quiet and she was also introspective. And me and her had a relationship where we said very few words and we had this telepathic understanding of one another. And when she got older, I used to sit in the room with her and I was just very connected to her spirit. So when she transitioned, I was 11,
mm,
and she was that ancestor that I carried, the one that I could remember. She still is to this day, my representative ancestor, that for a lot of stuff, she's the one that I trusted first, you know, when I start getting into it. So you know, I would talk to her. It's just like I just knew what to do. Like my ancestors would,
mm,
like, they had kind of built me to be a certain way. My internal spiritual realm was so rich and so for real. Like, you know, it was so pure. It wasn't like the outside 3D reality where I was
mm,
getting hurt and I couldn't trust nobody and I couldn't tell nobody. I just was very internal. I was very introspective as a kid, so I had her. It wasn't until I got to the 23 things started hitting really fast, like because that's
mm.
when I started meditating. I had been through a lot of trauma, put it that way. I had been through a
Okay.
lot of sexual assaults, and that
Mm, mm, mm,
skewed
mm.
my reality, and I was headed for self destruction. I started dibble dabbling into being very promiscuous,
Mhm.
and I viewed that promiscuity as a means of getting the love that I didn't get on the outside. So I
Mhm.
was just
Mhm.
wounded, you know what I'm saying, traumatized. And that led into other things, into self medicating with alcohol and stuff like that. So, I was headed for self destruction fast. And I ended
Mhm.
up being put in a position where I had a therapist who got me into meditation and yoga. And it was
Mhm.
a wrap
Mhm.
after that, because when I got into that meditation and I was able to go somewhere, like immediately, like it was almost as if my ancestors had been prepping me throughout all that trauma to not kill myself or get killed. And then when I was ready, it was like, boom, you somewhere else. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? And it kind of validated that little girl who knew it was something else out there. And I knew it was more than just this. And now I'm a seeker. I got to go find what it is. Like, what else is there? What else is there? And so that meditation, everything happens for a reason. Everything happened divinely in order. Big part of my purpose is healing our lineage. So I had to go through a lot of extra trauma, and I used to go through stuff and went through things, and I would be like, if I had to go through this so my daughters don't have to go through it, it was worth it. It was
Amen.
worth it.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that was it for me. That was the validation. I had to go through trauma
Mhm.
first,
Mhm.
and then I got put in a position where I got to be in meditation. I went meditation, and I started exploring different dimensions immediately. It was like I went from yoga, meditation, crystals, metaphysics. It
Mhm.
was like
Mhm. I
I
remember
just
you
jumped
saying that on
deep.
that episode you recorded
Yeah, I just
about
went.
how the journey began. You were talking
Yes,
about your entire process then and getting into massage therapy and which led to the Reiki
yes.
mastering of self and for others. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yes, it is.
Mm.
It's a beautiful journey. It is a beautiful journey. And like I said, I look back at it now and I'm like, everything that I had to go through, I'm grateful that I was able to go through it, because I chose this. I
Yeah.
came to
Yeah.
this planet to heal. We got a lot of wounds in our family. And so
Hmm.
we're finally to the healing side, which is a beautiful thing too. But yeah, my childhood was something else.
Yeah.
Um, so something else
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty interesting about you, and we also kind of relate in this too, is at one point you were a minister
Hmm.
before you started your spiritual awakening.
Hmm.
Definitely, I got to hear about that. Tell me about that.
Man, oh man, let me tell you. So I had just turned 23, 6 to 6, yeah, about April would have been, my birthday's in October. I'm a Libra and
Hey, no wonder
they,
we get along so well.
you a Libra?
I'm a Aries, but that's my
Oh
sister's
yeah,
sign,
yeah, we
and yeah, we get
perfect.
along
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, my mom's an Aries, so we've always been extremely close. So
Yes,
Aries,
yeah.
y'all my jam, okay? Reach out, reach out. So I was 23 and a half when I decided to give my life back to Christ. And I grew up in Methodist organized religion, kind of pretty much fundamentalist kind of Methodist Christianity religion. And I had been out there doing my thing as a young person, nothing too crazy,
Mm,
nothing too extreme, but just being a young person in and out of community college and such. And at the time, I was dating this guy that I had been dating for a little over a year and a half. His sister and I at the time were very close. And it was the first time that I experienced dating a guy for a long time and then he having sexual intercourse with someone else, to my knowledge, and cheating to my knowledge. Of course, he was young too, and so what else can you expect from a young man at that age,
mhm,
right? But that was the first time that I had deeply, deeply cared for a young man, and that happened. And so, not too long after it happened, I just had this nudge, this inclination to go back to church. And so one morning I woke up. It was like I want to say Easter Sunday that year, and I was like, I'm going to church with you and daddy today. I just feel like, I need to. And my mom was like, yeah, sure, of course. So I went to church. I went up at the end of the service, gave my life back to Christ, and I just began to remove the things that Christianity tell you are no good for you. And of course, some of them are no good for you. I was a smoker. I used to smoke cigarettes and I was drinking a lot, being a young adult and smoking weed and all that stuff, right? And so within a month's time, I stopped all of it. I'm the kind of person, if I say I'm going to stop something, I can do it cold turkey. And that's basically what happened. And as I began to just go to church every Sunday, and then I started going in the middle of the week because I was like, okay, well, I want to go to my sister's church because 4 months before that, she too gave her life back to Christ. My sister and I are 6.5 years apart. So at the time, she wasn't even 30 yet. And so I didn't think it was a coincidence that we were kind of doing this thing at the same time. And I didn't actually know that she had recommitted her life until after I did it. And I said something to her before visiting her church. And she was like, I did the same thing. And Ray, my niece at the time, well, not mine at the time, but at the time my niece was adolescent, and they both did it at that time frame 4 months before. And I said, I'm going to come to your church. I'm going to visit your church because that was my way of getting close to her. We had different mothers. My dad was married to her mother first, and so she lived about 45 minutes away in Baltimore City. And so I was like, I want to reconnect with my sis in this way. And so that's what I did. I went to her church, and it was over after that. After that, it just freaking skyrocketed. And we both became ministers one Sunday doing a high energy service. And our pastor announced that he was going to make my sister and one of our friends in the church ministers in training. And this all happened within the first year of me joining that church, the same year that I had broke up with the young man I was dating. And I was 20, I had just turned 24 when it happened. So I recommitted in April of that year when I was 23, and by that October of my birthday, we there was talk of us becoming ministers and training in their faith. So it
Wow,
was
he saw the
really,
light.
really, yes, it was really, really fast, and everything it seems with me in the spirit world happens very fast, and I think a lot of it has to do with my innate ability to just know that clairsentient about me is just, this is what the path that I need, even though there's problems with organized religion, because at the end of the day, it still ties to spirituality. Spirituality is just broader, and it comes
Mm-hmm.
with a lot more freedom than organized religion. And so it was a wrap after that. I mean, the speaking in tongues, the being in church multiple times a week, helping the youth of the church, and just listening to the voice of the male God that I was in worship with at that time. And through all of that, I still had my own mind. And I was very warped by organized, fundamental Christianity back then. But I've always, like you, very introspective as a kid, very introspective, writing poetry, you know, writing songs, singing, all these things to self-soothe and just develop who I want to be as a growing young woman. And so there, that time period, it was about a 3 or 4 period, it was truly remarkable for the positive sides of organized religion, but then there was a lot of dark sides to it as well. And then I also experienced spiritual psychosis, which, if anyone doesn't know, it's when, yeah, it's so hard to explain, but it's like this feeling of having psychic energy and psychic abilities with the male god that I was worshiping. But the problem was that I was not educated enough about how the universe works on a larger scale of all of these things, right? That there was some misinterpretations in the messages that I was receiving. And as a result of that, a year after joining that church, I was on my way to marry somebody I had no business marrying.
Mm. Yeah, that's scary.
Okay. Now, luckily for me, this was not like an abusive situation, and the young man was abusive or anything like that.
Mhm.
The ancestors and spirit guides was looking out for the kid because it could have been entirely different. I could have had a baby with that young man and been tied to him for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
And so the spiritual psychosis instance happened one night. I used to wake up, and still sometimes do. I used to wake up and feel inclinations from what I believe was the male god that I was worshiping at the time, right? And I would have these visions right in the moment of prayer when I woke up 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had a vision of me being in a wedding gown, marrying this young man. Because as we know in organized religion, they push marriage a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They push the patriarchal beliefs on you, right? And so I had already had the desire to be married, and I always wanted to be married, and I always saw myself as a Black Cinderella. And so the spiritual psychosis aspect led me to misinterpret that vision that I had. Because what I later realized is that the vision was not for me, the vision was for him, because he was struggling with wondering if he would ever be acceptable to someone to love, care for, and be married to. So I had to learn coming out of organized religions to interpret my visions and dreams so that
Mm-hmm.
they so that I could clearly understand and see whether it was about me or whether it's about somebody else. And there were a lot of other
Yes.
instances after that where I was able to practice while I was still in organized religion. And so I married that young man, and in any of the carnal ways that you can think of, what a husband should be, he was not that. He did not have the experience. When we got married, he was still a virgin. Okay.
Mm.
He had no previous dating experience that even allowed him to understand whether he was truly ready or not. We just
Mm-hmm.
throwing out, God said we supposed to be married. God said we supposed to be married. My first mistake was God ain't gonna tell you you supposed to be married to such and such and such. First of all, that's not how the
Mm-hmm.
universe works.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's not how the universe works. So that was my first mistake. And that's why I say it was spiritual psychosis, because I wanted it so much for myself that I inserted myself in this vision in a way that was detrimental to me and my life plan. Because that's the year and a half that I was married to that young man. That's time I could have been spending and or would have spent on my self development, career wise, spiritually as well. And as a growing young woman in her mid 20s, my prefrontal cortex wasn't even developed by then. It hadn't even
Yeah.
closed up by then. It don't close till after 25. So,
But you know
you
what? It
know,
was a lesson. That's what it was.
exactly,
It was a spiritual
exactly.
lesson. It was like, hey, I need you to know this work is serious, okay? And I need for you to be making sure that you interpret visions properly. So we're gonna give
Amen.
you a little lesson,
Yeah.
And I think those lessons, I think the greater the responsibility, the greater the lessons are. And it's better to get those lessons up front. And you need something that's gonna be like, oh my God, like because for you to even see that as that was his vision, because images come to you, visions come to you. And so that's a big part of one of your powers. So you need to know how to use that correctly. Like, for me, opening portals and things like that, when I started reading tarot first, my
Mm,
ancestors, the main thing with them is opening and closing. You're opening and
mm, mm,
closing. Like before you open these spiritual doors, I need you to understand this is not a game. Like they wanted me to know that you need to be responsible with opening these doors and these portals, And so it's such a heavy responsibility that I think we need those kind of wake up calls. And I think if nothing else, it was still an important experience for your spiritual development. So you still were developing spiritually.
mhm,
Maybe career time wasn't it right then and there, but they was like, we need you to get this because this is important for your type of work. So yeah,
mhm.
he just happened to be the
Innocent
the guinea
bystander.
right. He
Innocent
got to be,
bystander.
yeah,
Mhm,
in
mhm.
your journey. So
Yes,
that's
indeed.
that's deep. That's really deep. So while you're having these experiences and you're discovering this other side of yourself, this other spiritual development and maturity, are you having anybody to talk to about this? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I had my sister. Again, I had
okay.
joined her church so that we could connect outside of our upbringing. Our upbringing together as sisters were always so very difficult because she is much older than me,
Hmm.
and our lifestyles were entirely different. I was a suburban girl born and raised, and she was a city girl born and raised. And so there were a lot of conflicts in our relationship that could have been prevented had our parents, all three of them, my mother, our father, and her mother, could have, if they had have been in better places for themselves at the time and been
Hmm.
more emotionally, more emotionally intelligent and emotionally healed at the time,
Hmm.
it could have been avoided. And so, although I saw her a lot and we were in each other's spaces a lot, there was also this great disconnect between us, this cord that I feel like our parents had kind of put in between us. And so I joined her church because I wanted to be closer to her. I
Hmm.
wanted to be closer to my bloodline and my niece
Mm-hmm.
and my sister. And so I saw that as an opportunity for us to get together. And so we were together all the time. And joining her church was monumental for our relationship. Had I have not
Okay.
joined her church at that time, I don't think we'd be as close as we are today and
Yeah.
as spiritually bonded as we are today. And so that was really monumental for me and for her too as well. And we found that we had more similarities than not, especially in our spiritual life. We had a lot of the same gifts. We come from the same father, duh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and such. And so we was each other's right hand. And of course, we had other friends in the church too that we relied on as well. And the beautiful thing about that time was there were a lot of other ministers and elders in the church who also believed in the kind of
Oh,
spirituality that I
good.
believed in, because a lot of people find themselves in spaces in organized religion where you don't have the ghost
Mm-mm.
talk, you don't have the supernatural talk. And so there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of supernatural talk in our particular organization, which was really, really great for us feeling safe too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. So you definitely were supported when it comes to that. And a lot of that, I always say, I'd be like, that's hoodoo, y'all. That's
Duh, our
it's,
ancestors.
I'm
Come
like,
on
y'all,
now.
that's hoodoo. That's like straight up hoodoo. I'm like, you don't see that? That's hoodoo right there. Like, but
Just taking communion. Come on now.
I'm
Taking
telling you, catching
communion.
the Holy Ghost. Come on, y'all. Like, you know what this
Come
is, running
on.
around the church in the pew and
What?
yeah.
I
So
can't tell you how many times I ran around that church, okay?
exactly. I'm
So
like, y'all, this is hoodoo. So just, shake the idea that it's so far from you. Like,
it's not. It's
it's
not.
like,
This is from our ancestors over in
it is.
Africa,
It is.
the Ifa
Yes.
religion of West Africa,
Yes.
all of those things.
And that's all hoodoo
Oh my
is a
gosh.
mixture. And, first of
Mm-hmm.
all they could do was Christianity. And so it's a mixture of African spirituality, Native American spirituality, and Christianity rolled together. And they created something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very much
Mm-hmm.
ours, particularly African Americans, and indigenous people for here. This is like our
Exactly.
thing, and we run from it sometimes. So it's crazy.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So you told me about that. Now, tell me about like what prompted the shift, like where you were like, okay, I need to focus more on what's happening to me on the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
spiritual development side versus the organized religion.
You would think that my dream empathicness would have done it, because I'm having dreams about people who, before I gave my life back to Christ, I was very close to, including the young man that I was dating and he cheated on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, about 2 years after that, 2 years me recommitting my life and still a minister in training, I had a dream about him. Now after we broke up, he continued to date the young woman he was cheating on me with. And so at some point she got pregnant, and it was supposed to be a baby boy. And I'm on the phone with his sister, who I was still very close to. And I was like, how you doing? How are you doing? She had a little baby too as well. And so I was like, I had a dream about your brother. Okay. And she was like, for real? I was like, yeah. I said, it's not like what you think it's going to be, friend. Trust me on this. Okay. This is going to be some ish. And I need you to hear me. And I need you to listen to me. And if I'm crazy, I won't ever mention it again. We don't have to talk about it ever again. I said, how's he doing? And she said,
Mhm.
he's okay. He's struggling right now. He been going through some things with his girlfriend, her and her crazy self. And I was like, all right, let me tell you this dream, friend. I said, I had a dream the other night that I went to visit him to check on him. And when I walk into his apartment, he's holding a baby. And so I said, oh, congratulations on having a new baby, yada, yada, yada. Because at this time, I'm healed. I didn't care nothing about that he was with the girl that he had cheated
Mhm.
on me with. So there was none of that carnal stuff interfering in this dream that I had about him. And so I'm like, oh, congratulations on having a new baby. I was like, let me see the baby. He doesn't speak. He's not speaking. I'm like, why isn't he talking? And I realized in the dream that he was in shock. He's looking down and he's this big guy. This guy is
Mhm.
6'9", you guys. Okay. Big dude. Should nothing be bothering him and causing him not to talk. What are you talking about? And so I get closer and I look at the baby. It's a demon. The
Mm.
baby has a demon face. Okay.
Mhm.
Anything you can think of crazy from these movies, that baby had it. That
Mm.
baby had it. And on next thing I know, the baby jumps out of his arms and goes running down the steps of the apartment complex to go outside, running from us.
Mm.
So I'm like, all righty then, Lord, what's happening? What does this mean?
Right.
And I was like, so that's when so when she called me that day, it was so funny because I was reflecting on that dream, trying to figure out what it's trying to tell me. And which is why I asked her, how's he doing? Because I felt like something was wrong with him. And at this time, I guess I hadn't done enough cord cutting, and or it was because his energy was so strong that he was struggling so very much that it was just touching everybody he knew, formally and or in the present. And I think that's how I picked up on it. And or God and the creator was sending me as kind of like this messenger or validation for the situation that had took place. So she tells me, friend, and she's someone I could talk to about paranormal
Mhm.
stuff too. And their whole family had been, religious and stuff. And so she was like, friend, they was pregnant and she miscarried at 5 months.
Mm.
And I said, oh shoot, this is why I had that dream, because they lost their baby. Now, the semblance of the baby being like a demon kind of thing,
Mm.
even to this day, I haven't quite figured out why the baby represented itself in that way. But I think it was so that I could have a clear understanding that something bad had happened to the baby,
Right.
right, in
Yep.
utero. And so she said, yeah, she lost the baby at 5 months. She had to give birth, and they had a
Mm.
ceremony for the baby. They buried the baby and had a ceremony and such. And I was like, wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you just make sure I tell them that I'm sending my love and condolences to them both and continued healing. And she said, it's so funny you had that dream. I just can't even believe it. I was like, yes. I was like, this is crazy. And at the time when I had spoken to her about it, it had already been like a month since the baby had passed. And so they were deep in their despair and grieving of it all, which is that
Mhm.
energy I picked up on, which is why I had the dream. And so I was like, man, this is bigger than
Yes.
anything that religion is teaching me,
Mhm.
than any of the workshops I'm taking with my pastor to prepare to be an ordained minister. This is bigger than that. This is something that is almost unexplainable. And if, God forbid, somebody has a gift and they can't articulate themselves
Mhm.
well, how
Yes.
frustrating it must
It
be, right?
is.
And trying to figure this thing all out. And I was like, this is not something that we're taught about in organized religion. And so that is when this whole new expansion for me really took place, because I realized just how strong this gift is when interpreted correctly.
Yes.
Because soon after I talked to my old friend, the ex-boyfriend, her brother, he hits me up on Facebook, I think it was, or Instagram. No, it wasn't Instagram. Instagram hadn't been around yet, because this is about the time of 2007 or 8-ish. And I don't know how. I think he called me or something. He got my number from her, and I said, yeah, he can call me. So he calls me. He was like, and he had me replay the whole dream, and he just started crying. He just started
Mm.
crying. He was a grieving father of
Yeah.
a unborn child, and he was somebody who really loved people, and he really loved the people that he loved. And so, yeah, it was that's when I knew that there has to be something
Yeah.
even more. And all
That's
this deconstruction just started happening. I just started researching more about theology and the origins of religion, basically. Yeah.
that's also a pretty deep, interesting subject as well. And then you can kind of see how it's all the same.
All the effing
It's all
same.
the same, y'all. While we complicate it and create so much division, at the end of the day, it's about the individual's journey and their path, whichever one of them work for you, that gets you to, the end result. That's what it's all about. I think we overcomplicate it as humans, about it's got to be this one, it's got to be in the image of a man, it's got to be, none of that stuff matters.
Mhm.
And what matters is the spiritual principles behind it, trying to be a better person, live a good life. And then it expands even further the deeper a person consciousness is. So then you
Mhm.
have access to these gifts and things that are told in some religions that, oh, you can't do that, only
Yep,
demons can do that. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm a little intellectual too. I'm like, it's got to make sense.
exactly.
That don't make sense. Only one side, the bad side, I can do it, but not the good side. Like I
Listen.
wasn't going for that. So yeah, I mean, you definitely very powerful, very gifted. I think I pretty much we talked about a lot about your dream empath, your clairaudient, clairsentient abilities. Basically, you've talked a lot about how your gifts manifest in your daily life. Let's talk a little bit about astrology, because I
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
astrology is a very important subject for you. Tell me about your role in astrology and how that works for you.
So astrology for me is more personal than it is about me using it to help others. I do use it to understand people close in my life a little bit more on a
Mhm.
surface level, because of course our experiences through this carnal 3D world play a part in how our astrological signs uh, manifest in our lives, right? And how much healing we've been able to do. And so for me, I am a Sun Libra. I was born 10/8, 1983. So I'm a millennial as well, elder millennial.
Hey, yeah, OG millennials. We just,
Okay, I
I'd be
love it
like, we the
here.
last best
Of a
generation out
dying
there.
breed, okay? Of a dying freaking breed, you guys. And then my moon sign is in Scorpio, and then my ascendant, which is also called the rising, is in Taurus. So I have a lot of strong signs in my three placements, my main three placements. And Libra is the one who is the lady with the balancing beams.
Hmm.
Scorpio is that scorpion that'll bite your ass. You get out
Got
of
a quick
pocket,
tongue.
okay? And that's also contributes a lot to my intellectual side. That Scorpio, they tend to be very introspective people as well as Libras. And then Taurus being the bull, stubborn, got to do it my way.
I got a
I
daughter
N
like
D E
that.
P E N D E N T, all of that, right? And so I have always known my signs, and even in organized religion, I still use that as a divination, as a tool to understand myself more deeply. And so I even even in religion, I was still doing all these voodoo or new age practices,
Hmm.
incorporating them all. And because I am the balance and beams lady by my sun sign, I like to get the full picture of things, which is why I think I still incorporated a lot of those things in my Christian faith as well. And so your sun sign is who on the surface level people know you to be, right? And then your moon sign is the center of your emotions. Now, me being a Scorpio, that is water, which means that I can be very emotional and I can feel all these energies emotionally from others. And Scorpio is very mysterious people. We like to keep a lot of our personal life private, like you guys as Aries.
Yeah.
And so then I get a lot of my intellectualism from my Scorpio side too, because of the introspective time and such. And so the Taurus for me and for everyone is the sign that you probably should focus on the most, because it is a side of you that also is front facing to the world and adds to your persona as a person. And a lot of people have mistaken me for being a Taurus sun because of the qualities of Taurus. One, also being similar to Libra, and then two, because of how I move through the front facing world. And I have a lot in common with Taurus usually, Taurus suns usually. And so your astrological sign, a lot of people don't know, but if you're on this here podcast, you probably already do. Your astrological signs are in alignment with the planetary systems in the solar system at the time that you were freaking born. So
Yeah.
that is why a lot of the apps that we use, such as CoStar and the Pattern app, will ask you what time you were born, because it gives you a more accurate depiction and picture for who you are at your core. And regardless of what you've been through, I don't know how the ish works, but it picks up on all of those things as well.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. And it's
That's deep.
science, y'all.
It
Y'all
is.
don't
It's
believe in
science.
science?
Exactly. And then see, you got the astrology piece. Numerology, I think, was
Exactly.
easier for me because it's
Mm-hmm.
matter of fact and it's like you go to nine. That's it. You can't mess it up. You can expand on that, but it's like one through nine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I can handle
Mm-hmm.
that. And so yeah, like I was saying earlier, like when I do the tarot readings, even though the tarot is heavily governed by the astrology
Mm-hmm.
system,
Mm-hmm.
I go by the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. The numbers never lie. So I'm able to see the numbers, and of course I have some general understanding of the cards themselves, and then of course what I get intuitively. And my readings are more spiritual readings anyway
Mm-hmm.
because they ignite something in a person's intuition. Then all of a sudden they turn on something inside of them like, oh, I need to do this, or they start connecting with their spirit guides and ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely astrology. You got me wanting to look at my birth chart. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
I'm
which one
telling
am I?
you, it
I'm gonna have to ask my
works.
daughter. Yeah, she
Yeah.
knows.
Let her
Yes.
read you. Let her do a reading for you.
Oh Lord, she's a
Yes.
Taurus too, and I'm definitely dealing with her stubborn butt right now.
Mm.
So young
He can be
adult.
very stubborn.
Oh
It's
my
so
God.
crazy.
Like
It's so
I
funny because my son, he's 7.5. He'll be 8 in January. He's an Aquarius sun, Scorpio moon, and a Capricorn rising. So he and
mm,
I are both air signs, and we share the same emotional sign, the Scorpio and the moon. And so we combat heads a lot
I
when
was,
it
I
comes
was
to
gonna say,
that.
first of all,
So
with that Aquarius and that Capricorn, both of them got slick tongues too.
and he's extroverted and I'm more ambiverted, introverted.
Hmm.
So I'm like, Lord, son, I'm overstimulated right now, son.
Right.
Read a book or something. Go read a book, please.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, we make it work. We make it work. And I think he will understand more why we clash a lot when he gets
Hmm.
older. I know why now as a mom and having my spiritual tools to help me understand him too, because I do want to be able to understand him so we can guide him in emotional intelligence, especially with him having those strong placements in Aquarius and Capricorn. Very, very, very strong, independent people, always got something to say,
Yes.
whether they're right or wrong. Okay.
Whether that's right, whether they right or wrong. That's hilarious. Okay, it's been an honor talking to you. I just have one more question for you
Yeah.
before we close out. What advice would you give to somebody that's experiencing their spiritual awakening,
Hmm.
and particularly people who are coming from a organized religious background?
Yeah. 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 It might be easier to focus on deconstructing
Mm,
religion first or in conjunction or simultaneously with strengthening and understanding yourself from a spiritual perspective. And it can make the process longer because you still may be entangled with the ideologies and the patriarchal systems and beliefs that religion has created for you and as a society. And it is eye opening, and you will get frustrated, and you will want to cuss everybody out, and you will begin to see things, okay? You will begin to understand things with this new level of consciousness, right? That's opening up for you. And so deconstructing the religion may be slower, but it's probably easier for you to ease yourself out of those ideologies and beliefs. And I say that because I was doing the deconstructing of my
mm.
understanding of religion and where it comes from and how it was created while I was still a minister in training. And then also after I was actually an ordained minister with a license in the state of Maryland.
Wow.
And I did it that way because I just wasn't sure if I was going effing crazy. You mean to tell me that this God that I have known about since I was 5 or 4 years old, my mom speaking to me about this male God, this Christ figure, nothing wrong with Christ. Christ is very
Hmm.
similar to New Age religion.
Hmm.
And so, this male God, I'm supposed to still believe that I came from my daddy's ribs?
I think yeah, and I shouldn't laugh, because
No,
some
no, no.
people
It's
believe
funny.
this.
It's hilarious.
Some people really believe this, but it's like, there's the common sense of it, but then you got to realize, like you said, some people just aren't conscious. When you say in Christ, you're speaking of the Christ consciousness. It's the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
energy, it's the level of heightened high vibratory frequency, which could also come in the form of Buddha, Krishna.
Mhm, mhm. Allah.
Yemoja. Yeah, I mean, so many different. It's to be representative of, and if that's more resonant to a person, then that's what you're going after. You're not going after the body of the man, like
Mm-mm,
and it's like
mm-mm.
that possibly should be discussed in some of these organized religions to help people to get a better overall spiritual experience, I think. But yeah, I mean,
But they can't talk about it because they
that's true.
believe that the creation of life came from Adam's ribs.
And I'm
Yet
like,
we are giving birth every year, every second, every minute from our mother's wombs, y'all.
it's exactly,
The
exactly.
cord that
And
tethers
we
us to
follow a
our
moon
mother.
cycle. You know
Come
what I'm saying?
on.
Like, so all of those things correlate, but we had to make it a man something.
Yeah. So I'll recommend this book. It's called The Great Cosmic Mother:
Mm,
Rediscovering the Religion of Earth. And through that, it is a hefty book. Take your time
hmm.
in reading. I'm halfway through it. It's 400 pages. I have been reading it all summer in conjunction with some other books. But it is a historical depiction of women's contributions to the world from both carnal and spiritual
That's
angles.
right.
Two
And that's
women wrote that book and they collaborated on it. And that will open your eyes to just how much of what we're doing now in this patriarchal society actually began with women who were the first scientists to sync their menstrual cycles and realize that our menses are connected to the phases of the freaking moon, y'all.
exactly. Yep. And this is also why we are going back into the divine feminine energy because when we have to, and masculine energy is not bad. I
No, no,
need
no,
that
no,
to be
no. We
known. We
need
need the
it.
duality.
We need it.
But
Yeah.
too much of it, as we can see, gets us what we got. We got a bunch of wars. We got babies not eating. We got babies dying. We have people dying all over the place. We have capitalism out of control, inflation, greedy society, people spiritless, like that's what we get when we
Abuse.
get abuse, you name it. The list goes on and on. Trauma, and divine feminine, we kind of coming in was like, okay, enough is enough. You're going to literally kill everything and everybody on the planet. Like we got to come in here and start to redirect the order of things back to where it started from, like what you're talking
Hmm,
about in
hmm,
that book. I've heard of that book. I've actually got a sis that's she used to do some book, like a book club studies on
hmm,
those.
hmm.
It is a
Yeah.
big book. It's
Yeah,
a big
it's
book. So
humongous. I got it on Kindle. It's easier for me to digest when I'm on the go and I have a moment and at home and being, doing the wife stuff and doing the mother stuff and everything. So this is what we have to understand for the ladies listening, especially those who are naturally born women, right? You have a womb.
mhm.
Whether you use it or not, it is still activated. Now,
Yep.
I was diagnosed with infertility barrenness at the age of 27 years old. It took us almost 7 years to get pregnant with my son. Okay. And so I had to go through that while also dealing with my spiritual awakening and going through the dark night of the soul and such. And so once you really understand and get into the energy and knowing that your womb
Hmm.
is a portal, it is it is the middleman between the carnal and the spiritual,
Yes.
whether
Literally, it
you
is a
use
portal.
it for childbirth or not.
That's
This
right.
is why if there were no men in power, we would have no wars, at least not
Mhm.
wars in the way that we know it to be.
Right.
Because when you have a womb, and if you've ever given birth to a child, there is a level of empathy and compassion for other people and other people's children
That's right.
that will enable you to treat people with love, that agape love
Yeah.
that the universe speaks about, and loving your brother and your sister as yourself.
Yes.
You won't have the ability to hurt people and harm people physically and abuse people
Right.
with that real understanding and energy, and really getting into that energy as a woman. You
That's
just
right.
won't. You won't be able to do it. I'm
Exactly.
out in public all the time and somebody child fall and I go running after that child,
Exactly.
and seeing about them. Something about having this womb and this energy that it creates, especially when you're a spiritual girly, that you won't be able to do those things. You just
Mm-mm.
won't.
I mean, I always say, sisters of the celestial womb, and women are the mothers of civilizations. I mean, that we are responsible for everybody on the planet. So, of course, we're going to have a more interconnectedness and an energetic core connected to humanity as a whole in a way that a man just never could, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like you
And Mother
said,
Nature.
and Mother Nature,
Like,
yeah,
come
exactly,
on.
which provides so much medicine, foods,
Everything.
oxygen, like,
We
like
would literally be
freaking
nothing
oxygen,
if she
you know.
decides that she's had enough of us. She could make us extinct like she did before, well, like she did with the dinosaurs. If she wants
Yep,
to start over, she's gonna effing start over. And us as human beings, we have no control over that, y'all. This is
yep,
why we need to go back to giving reverence to her.
absolutely. That's right. You are so right, girl. You you in here preaching now.
I'm
But you
just,
but you are so right, and then also what you said about anybody that's thinking about like going into their spiritual awakening from a religious background, deconstructing the ideology is important. And there's a lot of books out there. So
mhm,
anybody
mhm,
that's going to be on some sort of a path of spiritual awakening, just get ready to read. You're going to be doing a lot of reading, a lot of
mhm,
YouTube
mhm.
videos, a lot of different
A lot
stuff,
of
but
audiobooks,
a
okay? Get
lot of
into it,
audio
y'all.
books. Yeah, just get ready to get smart, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
But I think
And
that's
I'll
a great idea.
recommend there's a young man on TikTok if you want to start there. He is still an active minister, but his whole community is based on deconstruction
I
harmful
think I know who you're talking
theologies.
about.
You know, I'm the black guy. Oh my God. Y'all
Is
got to
he on
look.
TikTok or Instagram?
He's on all of them, and he has a YouTube channel as well, and he has other people who he has on his that's a part of his community who speak about their spiritual experiences. His name is Christian with a K, A. Dot Smith
I
on
think I know him.
TikTok.
I know I follow him on Instagram.
Yep, the Chris he's called on his at handle on TikTok is the Christian with the K, A.
Got him.
Smith.
He popped right
Get
back
into
up.
it, y'all. He will help you a lot to
Yep, I'm
understand
already
these things.
following him.
Yep.
Yep, yep. And he has a podcast too. And he
And
has
then
a
I
podcast.
would subscribe to their Patreon because they get into more deep stuff that they don't want to put out publicly. And I
Hmm.
would subscribe to that too. So get into it, y'all. Start
Yes,
with
get
Christian if
into
you
it.
can. Yeah.
Yes, and it's much more interesting, if I must say so, than we coming from a rib.
Yes. Come on now.
It's much
I
more.
got a fallopian tube. You mean to tell me I came from the male gods? What? And he impregnated Mary? What?
I know the whole story is just unbelievable. And then, like, my religious background was like really the whole thing was what? Okay, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. Okay, so
Oh
that
my goodness. Woo, that's even
and
harder
how I
than
came from
Christianity.
that to this. But you know what? I knew at 7 years old, that's why I said my ancestors raised me
You
because
something wasn't
I
quite
knew
right,
I was
huh?
like, mm-mm. I asked a question. My question was, what happens to the soul when we die? I'm a little deep kid already. And then somebody told me nothing. We go back to the, I said, I turned off. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I can't. I just, my little spirit was grown as hell at that moment. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do my time while I'm living in this house, but I could never. And I would never get
Look.
baptized. And that was the,
I'm not even gonna respond to that because we'll be here a whole nother effing 2 hours, you guys. Okay. Like we
so,
didn't even get into all of that.
right.
Like,
And not to mention, I'm like, who have I been talking to for the last 7 years? That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, something else is out there. And I'm just, maybe y'all just don't know about it.
yes, but you were divinely connected. You got out in your right mind. We
I
get out of
did.
these things.
I view that as one of the best things that ever happened to me, that I had enough sense to be like, no, I'm gonna go find stuff myself. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not
because
taking y'all's way.
religions condition you to listen to the spirit of others and not oneself. Everything
That's right.
begins with self, y'all. That's my
Yep.
last word. I ain't gonna say nothing else because again, we'll be here another 4 hours, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Everything begins with self.
It does. Well, you know what? Thank you so much, Monique. I definitely appreciate having you on the podcast. It
Yeah.
was definitely a joy. I need you to tell everybody where they can find you. Where can they reach you?
So my co-host and friend and I, Sheena, we have a podcast, as the poor stated in the intro. It's called Evolving Ish. It's on anywhere and everywhere you can get your podcasts. And we're also on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, more active on TikTok and YouTube than any other social platform. And you can connect with us there further. My personal pages are listed. Her personal pages are listed. and get into some of our content on our podcast. Our podcast is a mix of speaking about life things and daily things, intertwining the spiritual aspect of things. And our tagline is coming to the spiritual conclusions to help us navigate modern life. And it's a podcast strictly for female identifying persons, cis women, and it's a safe space. And Zipporah, I appreciate you for having me on the show and allowing me into your energy and the energy of your listener friends. And I don't take it for granted, girl. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure I'm going to see you out there on them TikTok and them YouTube streets and keep doing amazing things. And I can't wait to meet your co host as well. All
Thank you,
right.
dear.
You're welcome. Bye.